Wczoraj i dzisiaj w rosyjskich mediach propagandowych
The Ukrainian attack on the Kursk region was the main topic in the Russian propaganda media in recent days. First, we could see that propagandists involved in the Kremlin's propaganda machine were slightly shaken. Margarita Simonian posted a tweet on her social network that she was praying. Other war correspondents also working for state-run television broke the news about the alleged death of one of their chief war correspondents, Yevgeny Podubny. Later, this information was debunked, but nevertheless, it affected the grim mood among Kremlin's propagandists. After the momentary chaos, the coverage primarily focused on reassuring the Russian public. The message was that Vladimir Putin is personally monitoring the situation in the border region and controlling the actions of the services and regional authorities. The movement of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region of our country has been stopped. This was reported to the president by Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov. Putin has been in contact with the acting governor of the Kursk region all night and is personally controlling the work of the region invaded by the armed forces of Ukraine. The main information pushed by the Kremlin media was that the Ukrainian incursion had been stopped. Emphasis was also placed on showing that Russian society is consolidated in this difficult situation, believes in its authority, and, above all, is not panicking. It's difficult to fully confirm whether this information is true. Above all, the role of propaganda was to calm the mood and convince that everything is under control. In the nomenclature of Kremlin propaganda, the Ukrainian attack was described primarily, and in Putin's own words, as a great provocation, as well as a terrorist attack. Ukraine has long been described in Kremlin propaganda as an aggressive state, a terrorist state, a state that notoriously violates the rules of international law. Russia here, in this Kremlin narrative, is portrayed as a victim, as a state that permanently defends itself against Ukrainian and Western attacks. The president, for the first time, commented on Ukraine's attack on the Kursk region. Putin called Ukraine's attack on Russia a great provocation, stated that Ukraine's army is conducting regular shelling of civilians. It's attacking civilians, doctors, and pounding homes with rockets. It's interesting how Putin's involvement was reported in reassuring the public. It seems that presenting information about Putin's handling of an issue alone is supposed to have a calming effect, as if Putin is some kind of higher power who can solve every problem in Russia. A local crisis staff is working in the region. Putin is also awake all night. Overnight, on the phone, I reported on the operational situation to the Russian president. The president stressed that the region will receive assistance in all areas. Undoubtedly, however, for propaganda and for the Kremlin, the situation in the Kursk region is very unfavorable, primarily because of public perception. It clearly indicates that the state was unable to police the border and was unable to maintain the security of its own citizens. This undeniably once again confirms what we've been reporting on, that in the Russian state, human life has little value. The Kremlin's propaganda has focused primarily on reassuring the public and explaining to the public why all this Ukrainian action happened on Russian soil in the first place. One of the representatives of the Russian Duma stressed that it's very difficult to police such a long border, and that is why it was broken through. He repeated several times that Russia's problem is simply that, as such a large country, it has such a long border that it really takes a lot of effort to secure it. According to his narrative, it seems that the fact that the border has been breached is some kind of normal event, which can still take place in the future. If you consider the length of the state border of the Russian Federation with Ukraine, the Belgorod, Bryansk, and Kursk regions, it is almost 1,200 kilometers. This is a very significant length to ensure 100% security, given that it takes a lot of effort. And of course, Ukraine is using these terrorist attacks to show some actual success in the information field, both in its own country and among its Western principles. In the Bryansk and Belgorod regions, they used the so-called Russian Volunteer Corps, although we also saw Western equipment and Western weapons there.
It's
It's a rather serious group of the Ukrainian armed forces, quite well trained and prepared.
Z drugiej strony, rosyjska propaganda
On the other hand, Russian propaganda focused on discrediting the Ukrainian side. It was portrayed as a terrorist state, but there were also discussions about the very severe losses that the Ukrainians are suffering in this attack. Above all, it was pointed out that Ukraine has only propaganda goals that guide this attack, and the military value of this attack will be minimal. It was pointed out that it's the Ukrainians who do not respect the lives of their citizens, and that the Ukrainians are mobilizing everyone they can because they are desperately short of forces on the battlefield. At the same time, there was a complete disregard of any military losses on the Russian side of this attack, focusing exclusively on Ukrainian losses. There was also a detailed account of how many soldiers Ukraine lost, how many people were injured, how much Western equipment was destroyed, as if this was supposed to be some sort of consolation to the Russian public that it was Ukrainians who suffered more than ordinary Russian citizens who live in this attacked area. Of course, in this regard, our border guards, our armed forces, and the National Guard are doing an important job. But in reality, there are also reasons to be satisfied. Today, Gennady Andreevich and I were in contact and talked to our comrades in Kursk. Despite the shooting, despite the fact that drones are flying, despite the fact that attacks are going on, people are not panicking. The system is working. It's working for evacuation and relief. And of course, additional military reinforcements and the work of our Air Force will bear fruit. This means that the country understands that it is indeed in a state of war, that the West has declared on us. Much will depend on the unity of our society, keeping calm and problem solving. But of course, this terrorist attack must be repelled. And most importantly, using intelligence and control methods, it's imperative to prevent such possibilities to happen. Although, as I said, the border is huge. In the Kursk region, there are 5 border districts. In the Bryansk region, 6 border districts. Very serious tasks. And it is not impossible that they can still carry out similar attacks in some sections. Well, lessons must be learned from all these events. It's also noteworthy that the propaganda did not present one convincing version of how the United States reacted to the incursion of Ukrainian forces into Russian territory. On the one hand, it has been pointed out that perhaps the US did not know that Ukraine would invade Russian territory, and some sort of hope has been shown that perhaps the US is now disciplining Ukraine, and in response to how it behaved, it will take away its military and financial aid. On the other hand, however, some commentators have pointed out that it's impossible that the United States did not know about the planned attack, and that the United States is in fact responsible for it. And this is where a discussion broke out about how Russia should respond. One of the Kremlin's leading propagandists, Igor Korotchenko, recounted in detail what Russia should do in response to the attack. Not only should it oust the Ukrainians from its territory, but it should also focus on retaliatory measures that will bring Ukraine to its knees, begging Russia for peace. Here are just some of the solutions he listed.
Вы знаете, во всей этой ситуации мы должны прежде всего отметить базовый и важный для нас момент.
First of all, the US and the UK not only knew about the planned attack of Ukrainians, but even coordinated and supported it.
Более того, они ее координировали, поддерживали. And
the fact that today the Pentagon pretends it was unaware of anything is generally an obvious lie. Secondly, demonstrative retaliatory action is necessary. It's not enough to just push the advancing Ukrainian military forces beyond Russia's borders. We must assume that there is a state fighting against us. What we have to do is make them unable to support the maintenance of their own combat readiness, the combat readiness of the hinterland army. This is one of our priority tasks. This clearly implies that we need to destroy critical infrastructure facilities in Ukraine, primarily power plants. We have all the necessary means of destruction, and these objects have been identified. Consequently, our adversary and its Western curators will understand anything only when they feel acute pain. They should be brought to their knees. We should let them squeal and beg for peace.
Только тогда, когда ему будет реально сделано очень больно. Ставить на колени, пусть в соплях ползут и вымаливают мир. Поэтому руководствоваться надо нам той же логикой.
Our commanders should follow the same logic that the NATO bloc followed during the operation against Yugoslavia in 1999. What we need is a first massive attack on the infrastructure that is the basis for the sustainable functioning of the state and support for the rear of our enemy's army. Further, in relation to Budanov, if this person openly admits or claims to be the initiator of some terrorist attacks against the Russian Federation, then of course a political decision regarding his elimination is necessary. We should not spare Iskanders or CH missiles for this purpose. What is needed is a corresponding political decision that must be made and implemented. Apart from that, we need to create as many problems as possible for the intelligence capabilities of our adversaries. It's time to decide that all diplomats from all NATO countries and other countries unfriendly to us will not be able to move freely on the territory of the Russian Federation.
Zwraca uwagę, że nie są to nowe groźby.
It's worth noting that these are not new threats. All of them have already appeared in the Kremlin's propaganda, and some of them are already being implemented. For example, Russian bombing of critical infrastructure facilities, which began in a massive way a year ago, after the partial destruction of the Kerch Bridge. So these solutions are not new, and it's puzzling why the propaganda is being so mild in its threats this time. In the past, for example, visions of a nuclear attack, nuclear mushrooms over London or Washington, were invoked very often. This time, and for the time being, nothing of this sort has been stated by the propagandists. Judging by the reaction of the Kremlin propaganda to the events in the Kursk region, we can draw the following conclusions. First, that these actions are very unfavorable for Russia, and the Kremlin propagandists have a problem to somehow coherently cover this for the public. This happens every time the situation on the front line isn't going in Russia's favor. It's a very painful topic for propaganda because it raises various uncomfortable questions in society. On the other hand, we also see that the propaganda from the technical side was not prepared to report such events. Above all, it's worth mentioning that some of the propagandists are on holiday, and this difficult topic had to be covered by those who were on hand. We can also point to unfavorable timing for the propaganda when it comes to events in the Kursk region. In the last days, even before the attack, the propaganda reported in detail on prisoner exchanges between Western countries and Russia. This was a very positive image for the propaganda because it showed that Russia cares for its citizens, that it does not abandon its deserving citizens, as shown in the propaganda, and this entire narrative of prisoner exchanges served to build a sense of solidarity in Russian society, evoke patriotic feelings, and consolidate society in the face of the war in Ukraine and the clash with the West. At this point, the events in the Kursk region and the narrative associated with them have completely glossed over these positive narratives from the point of view of the Kremlin propaganda. And I don't think this was in any way planned or prepared in advance, just that events are so unfavorable for Russia in terms of timing that they took away from those themes that Russia could benefit from. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, take a look at our other coverage of Russia right here.